In this lesson, we're gonna continue to talk about RedShift and specifically about the RS render view, which is the RedShift render view. In the previous lesson, we just play around with a couple of lights just to get it started and with the text, with the simple text in a really dark scene. Now we're gonna try to make a better environment in this second lesson, but of course we're gonna improve lesson by lesson, step by step. We're gonna keep it simple and easy for the ones that are already they are just starting. But you're supposed to already know how to use Cinema 4D a little bit, of course. So you can check the Cinema 4D video course as well in the channel. So right now we're actually using the interactive rendering, which means that if I move things in the scene like lights or any other thing is gonna show up in the render view. We can also use the picture viewer in Cinema 4D to render out different snapshots, so we can save like different snapshots, and we can use the viewport as we are seeing on the left side. Now you cannot do more than one interactive rendering at a time, so you need to pick one. So you need to deactivate the IPR from here, and maybe you want to play it in another window or in the RS viewer. And here we can deactivate real-time renderer and the interactive rendering. We can also check the beauty and the alpha channel if we want to export in PNG. So without the alpha channel, we want to do photo montage in Photoshop or others. So we have a drop-down menu here in the view for Redshift, but we also have those settings if you open up the Redshift run viewer, which we're gonna use in this video. So if I go up in the render menu and click on the RS render viewer, I can open it up, and now I can use this one here. Now remember, you cannot play two different interactive rendering at the time, so I'm gonna use this with a simple visualization. So I'm gonna deactivate the IPR right here and use it just right there. There's no need of, creating many instances of the same rendering. Now, the first one is going to create a production rendering, which is the more advanced, and you can see it's not interactive. So if I move around in the 3D scene, it's not going to update this render viewer. But if I use the interactive, there you go. Now we can see in both windows the same exact thing. One is render, one is not. And also I can activate real time if I want a better performance in terms of speed, but like with less accuracy. Now we're going to do more examples about this so you can understand better what's happening when you work with these three different types of rendering, of render modes. Now, if I close this, let's go back here, and we can, I'm just going to create a new file actually. So I'm going to save this as, I'm going to close the previous one. I'm going to save this as lesson number 2, because this is what we're going to do in this video. We're going to do another scene using other types of assets and also giving more suggestions little by little. So we're going to start all over again. We presume that we have activated Redshift as a render engine, which is usually done by default right now in this version of Cinema 4D. So we have an empty scene. We can start to import something. So if I open up the asset browser, I already have a lot of stuff in here that I can use. Definitely, anything that I need to create a quick scene. I can use HRIs, which are environments with images. We're gonna talk about that later. I can use objects. I can use materials. I can use lights. I can use entire preset scenes. So if I start here with some models, you can see some appliances, and then we have, different categories. We have furnishing, we have models for motion graphics, for architecture, for product design, product visualization, packaging, and many, many more. We have, and also if you check here, there is a red hexagon which represent the compatibility with Redshift. So if I want to have something here, if I want to use some model here, definitely going to go for the ones that have the Redshift logo on top. So they'll probably be better, a little bit better when I'm going to render those. So I'm going to go for the appliances here. I'm going to use this one here. Now I can either click on the little download button and then finish the download. Once it's finished, I can click and drag it inside the scene like this. Really easy, fast, and simple. Now you can already see that this is a kind of a pre-rendering. We can see that we have some metal parts that are gonna have some reflections, and then also I can click and drag directly, and that's gonna basically download it right away. And then I'm gonna move this aside. If you're having problems again with basic operations in Cinema 4D, please check the videos about Cinema 4D. This is just a course about RedShift, so I'm not going to explain all the steps here that I do in Cinema 4D. But right now, I'm actually switching to the 4 views by pressing the scroll wheel, and I am just panning and zooming to adjust these 4 views. Now back to the RedShift menu, and then open up the RS picture viewer or render viewer, and now we can start to run the first, because we are still seeing the previous render, so you need to run a first one. I'm gonna start with an interactive rendering. We also have this lock already activated. This lock, it's kind of important, because if you don't have that lock on, if you click on another view, it's gonna automatically update the view. It's gonna show you, well, you can change it manually from here. You can choose one of these views. So perspective, top view, side view, uh, front view, plan view, whatever, back view. Now, if you don't have that lock on every time I click on another window, it's gonna update the render, which is not gonna be really useful if I want to work with the preview of a perspective rendering, or in a perspective in general. So usually I lock this into the perspective or into a camera, so I only see that view, and then with the other views are just gonna work in there. So here I'm synchronizing the two perspective, the ones here which is a preview, and then the one that is rendered inside the render viewer. All the other three, I will use them just for managing the scene, the lights, the objects, and any other thing inside the project. So right now it's pretty dark, and reflections also are pretty dark because we don't have any environment. Essentially, the environment is just a void. It's black, pitch black um, environment. So let's go back to the RedShift menu. Let's go to lights, and let's use the dome light. So the dome light is kind of a dome or like half of a sphere surrounding your scene, giving you already a nice kind of ambient occlusion, global illumination effect, which is totally fine. It's kind of a studio with a really flat lining, but it's completely fine. We need to start somewhere. Now you can use this. I want to do something a little bit more I want to do something reddish, something red, because I want to go for the colors of RedShift. So you can use pictures here. You can use just a simple color. If you use one color and you're only going to have one light, well, that color is going to override everything. It's going to illuminate everything, just as it's doing right now with the white color. So up here on the Explorer, the Scene Explorer, I can use the classic turn off, turn on in render, in viewer features that you have in Cinema 4D, in standard Cinema 4D. They will also work with the redshift objects and lights and everything. So if I select that here, then I can go back down to the properties and I can adjust that. And we already see this before with the lights. Now I can change the mode again, as I do normally in Cinema 4D. I can go, for example, and change and go to the properties of the scene or of the specific thing or the object itself. So here in the object of the light, I'll find the color, so the intensity and the exposure. We already saw this again with the point light in the previous lesson. So again, also here I can change the color. I want to make it red, and then I can adjust here the intensity. Now the brighter colors will emit more light, will be more intense in terms of lighting. The darker colors will illuminate less, and that's also the same thing for like emissive materials or lights in general. So brighter colors will illuminate more, darker less. Pretty simple, it's straightforward. Now I don't want to use a too intense red, because otherwise it's gonna really override everything, which is already doing that. So I'm gonna use like a mild red color, and you can play around with the color just like you do in Cinema 4D again. Then we have intensity. Now intensity is gonna affect the overall render. So you can see that it's not, well, it's basically illuminating more or less. So the intensity is kind of the brute force, the strength. The exposure, on the other hand, you can see is working only like on the reflections in a way. So usually exposure works more on the brighter areas of your render. So by playing with the intensity and the exposure and the color, you can start to customize a little bit this really simple render settings and illumination. So maybe I want this more red, like the background more red, but if I adjust the exposure, it's gonna be less intense and so on. So these are the first steps. And now here also on the view, I can change and make that not like advanced render, because I'm already rendering with this the render view. So I don't wanna fatigue my computer too much. So I can change here in the display some like lighter display of the scene, maybe wireframe, maybe solid, or just constant. So nothing that is gonna be too heavy. So I can concentrate the power here in the render viewer and not spend the energy of my graphic card all around. I just want to focus on my render viewer. That's going to be a good option. And there you can also adjust here in the dome light again. You can adjust also the visualization on the preview, on the 3D preview. You can also deactivate the background again if you want to like an alpha channel, or if you just want to have black background, or if you want to have another type of background. So you can work with the environment and the backplate, but we're gonna explain that later. This is kind of more advanced. Now in the other panels here, you'll find pretty much the same thing you find in Cinema 4D. So you can deactivate the shadows. You can change the size of objects and other things. Let me add here a plane in Cinema 4D. So we can see also some shadows on the bottom, and you can see these are really diffuse shadows. They're not like sharp shadows or pretty visible shadows, because, and also I'm enlarging here the plane size a little bit, because this is what the dome light does. Dome light is an environment light. It's not gonna be focused on emitting pretty defined photons and shadows. Now I want to go here in the materials. I want to create a new material. Let's go for material, and I'm going to create a new red material, just like we did again in the previous lesson. So nothing new. Just want to add this nice reflective bottom plane on over sorry under my objects. So yeah, that's reflective. I'm gonna click it and drag it. Well, if I cannot do it directly in the scene, I can drag it directly here in the object, in the outliner up here in the scene explorer. There you go. Now we have another nice effects. We have some reflections on the ground, we have some shadows, we have some good transparency effect on the blender object. We have also, I'm gonna make this darker. There you go. So it's a little bit better. So you can see how everything is turning out nice. Now remember, we are in RT, which means real time, quick, fast. The faster render here in RedShift at the moment. So I can again like see that everything is pretty fast, and it's everything is running real time. The progressive rendering here, the interactive rendering here is pretty fast because we're also using real time. But the first time probably it needs to like calculate some things here before it gets really fast. So if you see here, it's kind of processing, so it's going through some rendering. And if I see down here, I can see that we have something going on, like calculating the materials and the lines and the environment. So give it some time, and then it's gonna disappear, which means that it calculated everything it needs to calculate, and then it can run smoothly and nicely. Now, if you want, you can open up the materials on the project, on the material management here panel. And these are all materials that they work with Redshift. But sometimes you can also try to convert those more. So if you go to Redshift materials and go to tools, and go down here, you have some options like convert all materials, or like you have another option here. You have the possibility to convert and replace all materials. So if you have problems with some materials, you want to try that, and maybe you can fix it. Otherwise, you need to create your own Redshift materials and apply them to the scene. Now you can also click on the little hamburger icon menu. You can dock this as you do again normally in Cinema 4D. You can click and drag around and dock the Redshift render viewer to, and I want to split the view here just into two parts. So one part is the preview and the perspective in Cinema 4D. The other one is the render. And remember, the smaller is the rendered window, and also the better in terms of speed and performance. So that's another fix you may want to do if you're going really slow with your real-time rendering here and your EPR rendering. You can, make this window just a little bit smaller. Then we have some passes here. Well, we don't have any pass at the moment. We can just check the RGB and the alpha channel, so red, green, and blue channels, so the alpha channel. Again, from here, we know we can change the view. We already saw that. Here we can freeze the geometry, so we will not see any geometry update if we modify the 3D, basically. So we're not talking about materials and lights, just the objects. Here we can take a snapshot. Now, snapshots are really useful because I can keep track of any change that I do in my scene. They are also available in the in Cinema 4D, and also it's giving me some information about the render time, and here are some information about the resolution of the rendering and so on. You can see right now it's still rendering. You can see down there that it's rendering this out, and so we may want to wait before we save a snapshot. And once we finished, we're happy with the render here, we can click on the plus to save the snapshot. We can also open the snapshot in the picture viewer of Cinema 4D, which is the one we already saw up there. Or we can use the copy frame buffer, so we can copy whatever it's in here and then paste it in another space, in another application. Here we can change the zoom, so we can make it smaller or bigger. We can use fit window to make it fit, and use the camera or just fill window to fill the overall window. And we can see it in the original size of the render. And again, once we're ready, we can press the plus and save in the snapshot panel the first snapshot. And also I can change the name there. I can select it, I can delete it, I can see the info, I can double click on the text and change the name with like test01. Now you can see I've made some changes here. I just jump ahead a little bit. I changed some of the intensity of the color of the material of the environment, and now I want to save another one. So I just click on plus and save the other snapshot. And just as I did before, I can check if the render time increase or decrease. I can double click here, give a new name. So I can save all the steps. I can track out all the changes that I do in my scene. So I can go like back and forward and see which one looks better and so on. Now I can expand this even more, so I can see I have also some additional settings there on the right. Now these are for post-production and other stuff we're gonna see later, so I don't want to show you this right now. Just gonna give you a quick overview of everything that happens here in the render viewer. Now if you deactivate the real-time rendering, we have some extra options. So first of all, we can use bucket mode. Now bucket mode is slightly different from progressive rendering. So it doesn't progress like in the overall image, and little by little it's just gonna divide the image into many different let's say squares, which are the buckets, and then it's going to render the image like piece after piece, portion after portion. And then when it's finished, there you go, we have the last bucket there. When it's finished, you're gonna see that this is gonna look way better than real-time rendering. So definitely IPR with bucket rendering mode, it looks better than what we saw before. With progressive rendering, you just need to wait and for the render to be to render all the different steps, all the process. Now we are waiting for this last one. Remember that transparent and reflective objects are the most heavy to download, to render. Now I click on plus, and I'm gonna save this also as test 3. This is a new snapshot, so you can compare them. You know, when you do different types of rendering, you can compare them. Now, if we deactivate the IPR, so the interactive rendering, and we run the basic render, again, with the bucket mode, it's going to change here. It's cutting the view, so it's rendering with the actual render settings that we're going to see in another video, but those are the same in Cinema 4D, and it's doing the bucket rendering, and that's going to be, again, the most advanced. So you're going to have the best quality but the less speed, so it's going to be really slow and it's going to take its time. Now, one thing you can do is use the region. When you want to render real quick only one part of your view, not the entire view, you can use the render region. You can use the render region or crop view, either if you're using the IPR or the real time, or any other type. If you move this region, it's gonna proceed and render out whatever it's in that region. So it's gonna continue with your interactive rendering in this case, because I'm using the interactive rendering. And once you're finished, just deactivate the render region. Now let's continue, and here also you can show the output before denoising. What's denoising? Denoising is an effect that is going to remove the dots in your render. So if you run the IPR, you can see that at the beginning there is some those little dots are really visible. Then they tend to disappear because there is a denoise effect applied. So the noiser is getting rid of the noise essentially. In the first part here of the rendering, you can see the high noise, really visible noise, and that's going to disappear the more you move on, because it's going to improve the rendering progressively, so you don't see it anymore. But you can see the before and after if you use that button. Here you can change visualization of the scene. So this is regular or standard, and then you have clay, which is going to override everything with the clay material. And of course, that's going to make the rendering faster because it doesn't need to render transparency, reflections, or all the materials. It just renders out one single basic material, which is really fast. That's good for checking out the shadows and the lighting, not really good for checking out the materials. And then we have the samples, which is going to show us the global illumination samples, or the samples of the render. Now you can also click with this to focus if you're using the depth of field effect, which we're going to see later on. Then you have the possibility to select directly the objects inside the rendering. So the second one is to select objects inside the rendering, and just activate it and click, and that's going to select the object in the scene, and it's going to show it to you in the outliner or scene explorer on the right. And then you can also click again on top of that to deactivate it. The last one is going to be to select the material. So if you click now, it's going to select the material. So if I click on the plan on the ground, just wait a few seconds and it's going to appear on the right. There you go. So now it's going pretty slow because I'm using the bucket rendering and the IPR. So I'm gonna deactivate the bucket rendering. I'm gonna deactivate the material selection, and there you go. So I'm gonna use the real time. So real time is gonna be less accurate, but way faster than what we see now with the bucket and the IPR. So if you want to make things faster and with more performance, more interactivity, make sure you use interactive rendering. Make sure you use real time. Here you can also save the image in a folder. So I'm gonna save this image, and you can choose if you want to save the alpha channel with a PNG, and try to avoid like strange characters. I'm gonna save it right away. Here in the file, save image as, and then you have extra options for the savings. You can save JPEG, PNG, HDR, EXR, and here in the view menu, you can change some things. You can open up the options and the settings here. You can work and see the snapshot slider or not. You can frame the view. You can create a frame like this, and you can let me see here, undersampling. This is pretty useful when you want to make things faster. You can increase the number, so it's gonna make a less accurate image but way faster image. If you want the best quality, put 0. If you want the faster performance, put 5. And then you have the zoom again, and the rotation. If you want to rotate, you can also flip the image before saving it, before exporting it, and other options that can be more. Some of these are pretty basic, some of these are pretty advanced. So just to show you also shortcuts here that you can customize, and configuration for the snapshots. If you want horizontal, if you want them vertical, if you want some extra settings here for the snapshots, you can go here. So yeah, you don't need to know everything. I just show you the most important things, but probably for some of these we're gonna come back later on. And also another trick you can do is just decrease the size of the render. So that's gonna make it faster. So hopefully you understand now better the different types of render modes here in Redshift. Sometimes it's doing this kind of stretch, but then it's gonna automatically fix. So I think that's gonna be enough for this lesson. And if you enjoyed, please subscribe to the channel to stay updated for other courses and other video guides. If you want to support us, please join the channel as a supporter. And we're gonna continue with more tools in the following videos. So thanks for watching. See you in the next.